has been something that has been a long time coming. So I will turn this over to our Public Works Director, John Lewis, and Dana Webb, who's coming up.
10 slide maximum.
Stop it. Hi, Mike. I didn't do the roll call, but we'll do it before the other meeting.
We need to do, are we good? Or do you need to do something?
We always need to do something, but we're good.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Appreciate the time tonight. This is something that has received some community attention. It's actually a little premature to be presenting to the City Commission, I think, but we're going to do what we can to give you an update. But we wanted to bring it to you because there has been some community interest in this idea of getting Oregon City the authority to designate speed limits in our community. And so we've heard it in meetings here. We heard it at our Transportation Advisory Committee. We've started the conversation with our Transportation Advisory Committee, and Dana's done the lion's share of the research on the process, and that's what she's going to present tonight. But we are looking for a little bit of direction from you tonight to either stay the path that we're moving forward with the Transportation Advisory Committee and bring it back to you with kind of some of the results. I mean, we've got questions about how enforcement might work. We've got questions about what other jurisdictions have that have made some changes with speed limits and how that's gone for them. We've got questions about how the county maybe can help us with some of the process that ODOT has established for getting cities the authority. So there's still some unanswered questions, but we wanted to give you an update because we didn't want you to think we weren't pursuing it. We definitely are in the heat of the pursuit. It's just a matter of we're not quite ready for a conclusion yet. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Dana, and then I don't know if there's something that needs to be stated afterwards, I will.
Right. Thanks. Good evening, Dana Webb, City Engineer. Tonight, I'm going to give you some background information on speed limits in Oregon. Oregon has two types of speed limits. There are statutory speed limits that are set in the Oregon revised statutes. That's 15 miles per hour on an alleyway, 20 miles per hour in a business district and in school zones, 25 miles an hour in residential districts, and 65 miles an hour on most interstate highways. All other speed limits are set through a designated speed process, which uses an established through an engineering investigation. So all designated speed limits in Oregon are based on the Oregon Speed Zone Manual. So they should be consistent throughout the state. So the speed zoning principles that are looked at in that engineering investigation include the context, the federal functional classification, characteristics, crash history, non-motorized users such as pedestrians and bicyclists, geometric features of the roadway, enforcement, public testimony, traffic volumes, and the number of accesses or driveways onto the facility. So these things are all looked at to kind of give a feeling of the roadway and how it's used. When we look at context, we'll look at density and types of uses. The speed characteristics look at 50th and the 85th percentile speeds. And then the crash history really looks at high crash characteristics and problem locations. So it's important to note that because the speed zone manual has these laid out, that consistent and objective method to designate the speeds. So in 2011, in House Bill 3150, the governor authorized road authorities the ability to lower that statutory 25-mile-an-hour speed limit down to 20 when certain criteria are implemented. And so that's if it's located in a residential district, fewer than 2,000 vehicles per day, and the 85th percentile speeds are less than 30 miles per hour.
What does that mean?
The 85th percentile?
Yes.
So the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling at or less than. So if you
At
took,
a certain time period that's being monitored, or just,
yes, yeah.
okay.
So generally, in the past, the 85th percentile was considered a reasonably safe speed. If 85% of the people are driving it and you're not seeing a high level of crashes, then that would be considered a safe speed. The new speed zone manual lowers that to the 50th percentile because they've identified lower speeds create safer roads.
And that's where the Portland whole thing, their 20 is plenty program came from. Okay.
Yes. So back in June of 2018, we brought to the City Commission at the time the concept of implementing this 20 mile per hour residential speed within certain areas of Oregon City. And so our recommendation at that time was that we look at that 20 mile per hour along our family-friendly routes. And so our family-friendly routes are those roadways in our transportation system plan that connect and fill gaps between our shared use paths, our parks, our schools, and along a network of low-volume streets. So kind of this idea of identifying these areas where people would be most likely to be walking and biking between uses and implement it on those streets. In that case, we would also propose a family-friendly route rider underneath the 20 mile per hour sign, which gives that context for the speed limit. So at that meeting, I think we got some feedback and we brought back some additional information. And the request or suggestion from the commission at that time is that we not implement this on all of the family-friendly routes, but we wait for a neighborhood to request this. And so again, this is an authority that the city has currently. We can designate the 20 mile per hour on those streets that meet the criteria. And so after that discussion, the Kenema Neighborhood Association made a formal request that the roadways within their neighborhood be designated as 20 mile per hour. And so we looked at that request and it met the requirements. So we brought back to the City Commission in 2019 an ordinance adopting the 20 mile per hour within the Kenema neighborhood. And because the Kenema neighborhood does not have sidewalks, instead of just having signage with the family-friendly route underneath the speed limit signs, we opted to include pavement markings that include, as shown here, it's kind of an adaptation of the Sharrow that also shows a pedestrian, so that vehicles are aware that pedestrians are walking on the asphalt. So that has been implemented. I haven't heard feedback from that neighborhood about, I haven't heard complaints about the 20 mile per hour. So the next component of the speed zones is the delegated authority. So that was recently approved in 2021 with a House bill allowing cities and 2 counties that were named, Multnomah and Clackamas counties, to request authority to designate their own speed limits. So currently, the city of Portland is moving forward with this request, as is Clackamas County. Happy Valley has determined that the staff effort and the number of streets that they would want to look at did not warrant moving forward with the process. So the process to become a delegated authority for the speed zoning is includes a minimum of 2 city staff, so 1 designated as the investigator and 1 designated as the engineer of record approving the investigation and issuing the speed zone. So those 2 staff would need to complete the ODOT training, have an understanding of the ODOT speed zone manual. And then at that point, you would complete your application and submit a quality control plan. That application includes your first engineering investigation and speed zone order. So essentially, that first one you work through, you submit that, and that's part of your application. ODOT then takes a look at that and issues what they will call a preliminary approval, and you'll enter a review period. ODOT will provide an in-depth review of your first 10 speed zones that you issue. After that point, if they feel the agency has done an adequate job, they will delegate that authority to you without their oversight. So this map is extremely hard to read, and I apologize for that. But what this map is a map out of our transportation system plan that shows the speed limits of the roadways in Oregon City. And what's shown on the map is the speed zone reviews that have been completed in the past 5 years. And so that includes a decrease of the speed limit on Maple Lane Road. That was a reduction from 45 to 40 miles per hour. That was a joint effort led by Clackamas County. City staff reviewed Central Point Road from Partlow to Parish Road. That was a reduction from 45 to 35 miles per hour in 2018. In 2020, we looked at Malala Avenue from May Street to Highway 213. That resulted in a reduction from 35 to 30 miles per hour. Holcomb Boulevard was looked at in 2021 from Redland Road to Kitty Hawk, which resulted in a reduction from 40 to 35 miles an hour. In 2021, we submitted a request for a review of Glen Oak Road from Highway 213 to Beaver Creek Road. The request was for a reduction from 35 to 30 miles per hour. We have yet to hear back from ODOT on that. Also in September of 2021, the city, as the, not the road authority, but as the agency which in Highway 213 is located, was asked to concur with ODOT's review of Highway 213 at the, around the Redland Road, from Redland Road to 205. And at that point, the ODOT request was to go from 35 to 30, and that has also not been issued. And so in those 5 years, the city has completed 4 reviews, been a party to a Clackamas County review and an ODOT review. So that kind of gives you a little bit of how often we do this. 3 of the 4 that were done by city staff were at the request of neighbors. The Malala Avenue one was a part of the Malala Avenue streetscape project, where the goal was to increase pedestrian, bicycle, and access to transit, so the safety component there. So this slide lists the staff considerations as we think about how this may move forward. So as John mentioned, the Transportation Advisory Committee has been hearing some of this and have been invited to either join us or listen in to the meeting tonight. We've also heard increased public comments from neighborhoods, both at the Transportation Advisory Committee and at the City Commission level, about speeding in their neighborhoods. There is some concern about liability related to setting speed limits, and then the staff time commitment to achieve that full delegated authority to do our speed zone setting without ODOT's oversight. And if at the rate we've done 4 of them in 5 years, it would likely take us, 10 plus years to fully achieve that delegated authority. And then we are having communications with Clackamas County to see if there is both interest from the county and openness from ODOT to somehow have the county, who's already intending to go through the delegated authority process, have that ability to do the work under their delegated authority for city streets. So that was an option that the Transportation Advisory Committee was curious about. So I don't have a good answer, but I think it's still an option that's on the table. And that's the extent of the presentation I've prepared.
Questions? I guess I'd like to know, if you know off the top of your head, what is the speed limit on Railroad Avenue? I know there's parts of it that are posted like 20 down closer to Bush, the Bush building, or excuse me, Weinhardt building. But the section I was curious, I mean, the whole thing, I guess the whole, people come off a 99E and they are moving when they come off a 99E to come down Railroad.
I know that I don't know for sure, so I'd need to look at that. My recollection is 25, but I'd have to look.
Between 20 and 25.
But, we have talked to ODOT about that slingshot effect that basically happens coming off of 99E right there by it's also that's where the tunnel entrance is. So there's a concern about pedestrians in and out of that tunnel. And so there was some interest by the city and ODOT to do a capital project there. It's driven by the development of the mill site. And there was some triggers that triggered that and a couple other projects along 99E. So, but my recollection is at least that first stretch, I'm pretty sure is 25. I don't remember, maybe an advisory sign that's further down that's 20.
I think when you get past 7th, I believe there's some signs there that are like 20. I mean, there's no reason to be bombing through there anyway, because we do have people that there is a demarcation where people can walk along the side of the buildings and go to use Railroad, but not adjacent to the wall where the big retaining wall is. But yeah, you're right, there is slingshot. I mean, I was parked between 6th and 7th, and I was, there was no cars coming, and I slowly backed out, and this guy just went by me. I mean, made that noise when it went by me, and I've seen that quite regularly. On that particular set, because I'm crossing back and forth to go to the elevator, and they're coming off a 99 like it's still 50 miles an hour, even though it's posted at 40 through Kenema.
Mayor, if you all the streets downtown is a business district, so they all should be 20 miles an hour, whether they're posted or not.
20, yeah.
Thank you, Sean. So these are the kind of things we hear regularly from the community, and it's, there's a vocal community that talks about speeding. And
There you go.
what we found, the last few years of studies that we've done, and there haven't been many, but we've been doing in addition to what ODOT wants in terms of evaluation of the facility, there's also a public involvement element of that we've been meeting through kind of an online questionnaire about speeds. And, we see mixed results in that as well. And we ask folks to, if they're willing to publish their addresses. So you see responses from people both inside and outside of the area that's being surveyed about. We saw it on Central Point, we saw it on Holcomb. I think we saw it on Glen Oak Road too, where, there's a diversity of responses about what is the appropriate speed on some of these different facilities. So there's two sides to this coin, and that's kind of aside from this delegated authority, which has me a little bit concerned about just the time and the process. It's as if the legislature created a directive, and we kind of get stuck with kind of bureaucratic process to get there. Now, maybe that helps with the liability concern that we have. If we go through that process, our liability
What is the
falls.
liability that you're,
My concern about the liability piece, and again, we haven't run this through our attorney yet, but we don't set, the city generally doesn't set speed limits in Oregon City with the exception of this 20-mile-per-hour thing, which is in neighborhoods where there's, I would say less liability because of the, Kanema was a good example of that. There's not, the pedestrian activity is small and, the streets are short and steep and those kind of things. But my concern is we set a speed limit and something happens and all of a sudden that we somehow take on a liability that in the past has been an ODOT liability.
See, I don't see speed limits. I don't see us increasing speed limits. I mean, I can see us decreasing speed limits, which would be an affirmative step towards safety, which is making less liable to suit. I've always been concerned about coming northbound on 99 through the tunnel and turning on the railroad with that crosswalk right there.
crosswalk,
And I don't understand, I mean,
just get picked off?
sometimes you just take action and, could you put a railing there and make that impassable, make it, people have to walk further north on Railroad and then put one of those crosswalk occupied lights there because I'll tell you, when you come off of 99 onto that turn, you're in the crosswalk. And I don't think too many human beings can react fast enough to avoid a collision. So if we have that within our power to see a problem and fix a problem, I'd be all for it. I don't care if it's a 30 feet of railing and a crosswalk further up and a lighted crosswalk occupied sign. That saves a life. That's good by me.
We do have plans for that project that it does require some right-of-way acquisition at the parking lot, the corner, so that because right now people just make it quick and again the slingshot. So this idea was to almost create kind of a bulb out that forced the driver to really kind of slow down to make that right-hand turn. So we have some concepts of that we've worked on with ODOT, and for a couple of years there, we were trying to actually acquire property there, and we weren't able to do that with, in the way that we,
But honestly, sir, do we need right-of-way acquisition when I'm saying put a railing on our sidewalk and move the crosswalk up 30 to 60 feet on our street and install a lighted crosswalk occupied? Is there property acquisition involved in that process?
This was part of the this was part of the comprehensive plan map and zone change as part of the Willamette Falls Legacy project. So when we negotiated, or when we were doing the comp plan amendment while the trustees still owned the property, so this is 10 years ago, from industrial to the new zoning, we had to work with ODOT on the mitigation. So part of the conditions of approval were, so if you're on 99 East southbound, when you make that first 90 left, the first 90 left as you're coming southbound right at the frontage of the Blue Heron property, that's going to be redesigned for a right-in, right-out only. And then ODOT identified as you're coming northbound on 99 through the tunnel to create a very short right-hand turn only deacceleration lane so that you could get cars out of the travel lane, because right now they turn right from the outer lane of northbound onto Railroad. So right as you come out the tunnel, there would be about a two-car right turn lane to get people out of the through traffic. That's why that whole railroad slides west a little bit, which is what drove the acquisition, the needed additional right-of-way width there. So those were considered in working with ODOT was one, how to make the right turn safer for vehicles, get them out of the travel lane as people come around that corner through the tunnel, but then also what could they do to make that pedestrian crossing safer to slow cars down for that exact reason of how quickly they can make that big right turn right there. So some of that's been looked at and conditioned as part of the Blue Heron development.
that solution is a much more difficult solution to accomplish than what I just put forward.
I think some of it's just the concern, again, the solution that Tony's talking about. It not only provided that very short pocket for a vehicle to pull into, it also gave that pedestrian, like we do on a lot of our curb outs, it gave them a little more room to get out there and actually look through that tunnel and see that traffic, as opposed to pushing them maybe further down Railroad Avenue, like into maybe some of where the parking is now, and then having them cross more of a mid-block is kind of what I'm envisioning you're saying. So come out of the tunnel, if you're a pedestrian, you come out of the pedestrian tunnel and you would turn left, walk kind of parallel with the railroad grade to a point where you could then cross more mid-block, right? Is that,
yeah.
And the concern there was just, or I don't remember how much detail we looked at an option like that, but as I think about it, it's that pedestrian then really the car nor the pedestrian don't have an opportunity to see one another until that car's already kind of slung-shot around the corner. And, so then, and I think we're taking an imperfect situation with pedestrian crossing, and, you wouldn't want to make it worse as far as safety goes. So that's, and we're,
Mr. Mitchell, I'm trying to get to you. Go ahead.
So under the current method with ODOT having the authority and we make a request, how long does it generally take before we get a response?
well, I say pre-pandemic, it was probably 9 to 12 months. We've been, Dana listed the dates again, but we've been waiting on the Glen Oak Road speed zone study for 18 months. And
Okay.
and they really aren't willing to give us a date certain.
Nope.
So it is a problem. I mean, that's been a frustration of ours and the Transportation Advisory Committee as well.
So here's my concern, and I understand and agree with everything you're saying, that ODOT has created a bureaucratic nightmare for us to try to get the authority. But that lead time is what concerns me when conditions change. And the example, Dana mentioned Maple Lane Road, which is now 40 miles an hour. Well, there are 170 apartments on Maple Lane Road, very close to the road, that are framed up and are going to start being occupied, I would guess, in just a few months, plus another 250 apartments just to the south of that. And we're putting in a roundabout, and we're going to have a dangerous mess with a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. So how can we get proactive on this is what I'm asking. Because, to me, as soon as, now you've got on the east side of Maple Lane, there's over 300 homes. On the west side, there's now going to be over 300 apartments. Doesn't that now become a residential district where we could implement the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit that is the state, I forget the term, but the state speed limit for residential districts? I'm just really concerned with that lead time and that 40-mile-an-hour speed limit as those apartments start to get occupied.
Great questions and good numbers. If I get straight to your question, because that's a collector, I don't believe we have the authority to make the change to 20 mile per hour. On the new Walnut, for instance, that would be internal to the neighborhood. We would have the authority there, but you don't think so?
I'm not suggesting 20, I'm suggesting 25 in a residential district.
The residential district has criteria, and it's generally the density of driveways.
Density of driveways?
So how many driveways in a distance? So a local street is always going to qualify as a residential street because it's got driveway after driveway after driveway. A road like Maple Lane, where there is no direct access from residences, wouldn't qualify as a residential street based on driveway density. Will Walnut actually have like a single family driveway onto it? if it won't, if it would just have a one driveway for the apartments, it
right.
wouldn't have enough driveways to likely qualify as residential.
Well, it seems to me we should start creating a list. That would be one of the streets, because people are going to be walking back and forth to to Berry Hill Shopping Center. And crossing the intersection there at Beaver Creek and Maple Lane. I don't know if there's pedestrian activated signal there, or, or a walk thing, but I'm assuming there is. I mean, I've never personally walked there but, I think Mike's got a good point. I think we add that to the list. And I guess I apologize, because I still don't understand what is the liability that we would have? I mean, is it somebody would sue us because we changed the speed limit? And I don't understand what the liability is for the city in this section that you're talking about. You started to answer it, and then you kind of...
Well, I mean, maybe the liability is small. I'm just not sure. We haven't asked the question of our attorney, but,
Okay, so something
the fact that we've not had the authority to set speed limits, to me, means that question needs to be asked. We need to get an answer to that.
So the question is, do we have liability, or we do, or we don't?
Right. Do we have liability if we become the speed limit setting authority?
Okay.
Even if it's a reduction, you can get sued for a lot of things. So I just want to we've always got liability, right?
Well, yeah.
So I don't disagree. If we're reducing the speed limit, it seems like, common sense tells you that's probably a reduced liability, but
The lawyers would say it depends.
it depends, yeah. So I just want to, that's work yet to be done. That's work that we haven't done. And the only other thing I'll say about Maple Lane for Mike is, because there's a roundabout there will be advisory signage that will likely, indicate, just like we do on other roundabouts, slower speed through the roundabout. So, I see the dilemma. We're working through the design process right now with that project, so signage is going to be part of that design approval.
Well, I would think another thing that would be helpful, and I don't know if this is part of the project, but it seems to me I think when you come to the tunnel, isn't there a flashing light there that tells you that there's a light ahead or to slow down?
Now there is.
Yeah,
that's new.
So, I mean, that could be added to, pedestrians maybe in the area or whatever, but, the biggest issue is that it's trying to get people to slow down. I would have to say that, as the things we hear the most about top three, well, traffic is in there all the time. Speed. And I think, I know that the McLaughlin neighborhood has been waiting for years to get a proposal in front of the city to reduce the speed on Lynn Avenue. They were not happy with the state saying, 35 is plenty. I mean, I came up Lynn Avenue on my way here, and I mean, there are people just flying down there. I mean, there's the curves, and and there's now a few bicyclists on there, and I just think we just need to figure out a way that we need to inform our public that they cannot, and it's not everybody from out of the city that's speeding through the town, it's people who live here too. So that's one of those lists. And I guess part of it too is that I know that, as Mike said, that it might be a bureaucratic snafu, and maybe we don't have the bandwidth because we're spending so much time on I-205 tolling, we can't go take the classes that the staff needs to do to be this. But I would say that if there's a way for us to control our own destiny in terms of these speed zones, and if we think that Clackamas County is going to be reasonable and work with us and respond to us in a manner that recognizes the urban nature of our community, because obviously they're dealing with a lot of rural stuff as well, and they've got speed problems all over the place. I think that for me, option number one is not an option. I do not want us to stay with the status quo with ODOT, because I don't think they've been responsive in this particular issue, and it just takes forever. And they're all doing I-205 tolling, so who's left, to do this project? But I think it's somewhere between a combination of 2 and 3. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't know what it takes to do this course. I mean, again, maybe like Mike says, and you said, that there's a lot of paperwork involved, but I think at least we should be able to look at what what does it take to do that? how many person hours is it going to take this? Is it, online classes? Do you have to go there? Is it, I don't know what's involved in the training that you have to have. Because I'm sure ODOT is not wanting to give this authority up willingly, is what I would say. That, have them kind of look at both things. We could have TAC kind of move on and then look into this and get us some more information about what it would actually take for us to be our own authority. I would at least like to know. I'm not saying I support it. I just want to know what it is and what it would involve. Okay, looks like we got a little bit of consensus.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. It's exciting. So we got Maple Lane, we got Lynn Avenue, we got Railroad Avenue. That's 3. We'll come up with 7 more for you, and then you'll have your 10. I've seen people bomb down Park Avenue, too. I was just like, I don't get that in that neighborhood. Well, we're done early. Do we have anything else exciting we can talk about? I guess the other thing you wanted me to mention, I forgot to last time, is so that city manager is working to bring before us a land acknowledgement statement. We've had lots of requests, maybe not to you, but I've gotten them. And I looked at the one that the college has, and I think it's reasonable, but we're going to run it by our friends out there and see what they say about it, and then bring it back to us for further discussion. So, anybody have anything else exciting? I know Mr. Zook's going to raise his hand because he always has something really exciting for us. He's hiding now. Okay, all right, let's adjourn the work session. We'll reconvene again at 7 p.m.